Thanks, Chris. Thank you, everyone. Good morning. Welcome. It's nice to see you. The theme this month in our church is height. So when I decided that I wanted to be a speaker this morning, I kind of let my subconscious chew on the idea of height, because you say height and it can mean a million things. It really can. So I picked a few to discuss. And one of the things that's always fascinated me is the nature of fear. Everybody hear me okay? Lovely. The nature of fear, what it means for each person, what comprises a fear. So I kind of went with that for a little while, and let me know what you think. When I was a lot younger than I am now, I climbed. The first climbing I did was over the crib rails in my room and onto the floor, a substantial drop, about 3.5 feet, scaring the life out of my mother. My brother and sister were older and went to school during the day, so it was just my mom watching me during the day, or attempting to. According to her, she was downstairs in the kitchen. She heard an almighty thump. She rushed to my room, saw me sitting on my floor looking somewhat dazed and a little puzzled, but mostly unharmed. She made sure I wasn't oozing blood or there weren't any protruding bone fragments. I was the third kid. And then she more or less left me to it, because she figured if she put me back in the crib, I was probably just going to climb out again. Once I became more mobile, I explored newer places to climb in the house, like the top of my dresser. The slippery coffee table in the living room made an excellent stage. The back of the sofa was pretty much the same. The kitchen counter was a great place to sit and watch my mom cook or wash dishes. The washer and dryer, they were funhouse rides. And I'm told I often indulged in a few handfuls of Cheer detergent while I was up on the washer. The whole Tide Pod thing doesn't even faze me. Much to my mother's horror, the worst one, though, was the wrought iron railing that paralleled the staircase on the second floor landing. It was just begging to be climbed. So I climbed it on the outside from one side to the other with about a 10-foot drop. Well, when my mom got tired of yelling at me for climbing on things in the house, she ordered me outdoors, where I promptly began making my way up the support trellis of the patio awning. And then the spindly branches of the poplar and the thornapple tree in the backyard. But they were both pretty useless, because they really couldn't support much more than a bird feeder. But after a while, my mother stopped panicking, because she noticed, that while I might scale up something, I rarely fell or jumped down. I just usually reversed and then dropped safely to the ground again. So she more or less left me to it. And after a while, she resigned herself to saying, "Look, just don't damage or break anything, including your neck. I do not need a panicked ambulance ride through rush hour traffic." We lived outside of Washington, D.C. It was always rush hour. "Your dad will miss his dinner. Your brother's got soccer practice. I've got a tuna casserole in the oven. Look, just be careful. Okay, be careful." There's no question to me why my mom has a permanent nervous tic when it comes to me. So as I got older, and this desire to attain heights and the vistas they provided began manifesting itself in different ways. For example, at the start of each school year, I would set myself yearly goals, like straight A's. That hardly ever happened. Student of the month, best handwriting, tidiest desk. This was one of the many advantages to having an older brother, much older brother and sister, because they always had some science fair deadline or a project looming, and watching them struggle with the process of achievement and completion went straight into my brain, sank to the depths, and became a kind of anchor against which I tethered any ambition that I had. All I was doing was following their patterns, including their panic. And from playing soccer, I learned early how to take a fall both on hard dirt and soft ground. But some sorts of goals don't provide a physical high. They certainly give an emotional one. And interestingly enough, it was the experience of the feeling that enticed me. What did it feel like to be called in front of the whole student body and handed an award certificate for Student of the Month or perfect attendance? Would people view me differently? And if they did, for how long would that last? I wanted to know for myself the squeak of the steps leading up to the stairs at the end of our cafeteria, or cafetorium as they called it. I wanted to feel for myself the spotlights of the stage on my head, and the terror and the magnificence of all those eyes on me. I wanted to find out if I liked it or not. How long would that honor go on for, and how did you know when it ended and people moved on to the next big thing? In other words, how long did that high last? And what would I do later? Would the desire be appeased, or would I soon have this agitation again, this itchiness under my skin to scale some new peak? I kept attempting to climb in the classroom and the playground, and sometimes I fell off the jungle gym and landed face down on the sand with a bloodied lip. Sometimes I failed spectacularly at a math or a spelling test, and I got mocked and called stupid because jury of your peers is always fair and impartial. More times, though, I got sent out of the room or punished for losing patience with myself or with someone else. I didn't have any filters at that age, because most kids don't. But kids don't have a fear of falling either. They know it's part of the process of growing, and having loosely knit bones and a lower center of gravity really works in their favor. We lose our knowledge of how to fall with age. Luckily and strangely, I found that once I reached a goal, like learning to spin on the ice and making that really cool sound, executing the perfect cartwheel, that kind of thing, I was done with it. Like I'd passed a marker on the side of the road at a high rate of speed. It's just checking in. I experienced a period of elation, perhaps a few hours of extended cheerfulness, completion and peace. Then I was done. I'd finished it. It was in a box. It was behind me. No need to go revisit it. It might have been the result of being the youngest in the family, because when the spotlight shines on your success, it's intense but brief. But then the light swings away quickly to the next thing that presents itself. But this is good, because limelight is much more appealing in short bursts. Too long in its glow, and you get burned. But still, I liked heights. I liked being above. I liked riding in a van because it was higher off the ground than, say, the station wagons of the 70s. I liked being able to see the scope of things before I proceeded. I started playing violin in 5th grade, instrumental music at school, not because I had any real desire to play the violin, but because if I had to be forced to sit in the cafeteria, I decided I was going to be on the stage instead of in front of it. I love the idea of performing on a stage because it just plain looked like fun to me, and I wanted to try it. When I got older and started competing in music and drama contests, it always surprised me if I won, because I wasn't thinking, I have to win and get that medal. I have to beat that person. I have to get my name in the program. I have to get the certificate. I was competing against my own nerves and my own faults, just to see if I could do it. So as adulthood overtook me, I realized what I really liked was collecting experiences and the feelings they produced. Even now, the testing of my own limits and the occasional failure is what drives me to achieve more than anything. With such a process, my fears splintered and became so much clearer, more segmented, and easier to attack. That came as an odd sort of blessing. I could separate the dross from the silver and really see what I was capable of. That's an ongoing process, by the way. The uneasiness I felt, the constant itching under my skin, wasn't to achieve immortality or to be awarded. In fact, the times I've been the most restless and unsettled are when I haven't been moving enough, or if I've been locked into a situation where it's routine and predictable with no room for ingenuity or change. My worst fear isn't falling or failing. It's not being able to try. I am completely terrified of inaction, of having a prefabricated situation handed to me with only one possible outcome, and of not moving, not constantly pushing myself upward or even sideways to something else. Bruises are a part of the growth. They are temporary marks of momentum, though. They're not tattoos. So when putting together the notes for this, I started to think about all the places I visited in the world, and I've been very fortunate. And I understood something I missed before, as you do when you sit back and you reflect on your life. In every city, every building, every historical site I have ever encountered, my first instinct, and it's insatiable, is to climb to the highest point I possibly can. I'm not sure why, it just is, and believe me, I'm a slow climber, but I don't stop. I've climbed to the top of the Eiffel Tower with my son Max. I would have gone even further, clear up to the cell towers at the top, but a guard stopped me. I don't know if anyone has ever been up that high on the Eiffel Tower. You have to work to get up there. And the elevators going up were broken. So standing on that narrow platform at the top, feeling the entire structure deflect about this much in the wind, it is unnerving, but it still ranks as one of my best memories. I've climbed to the top of the Duomo of the cathedral in Florence just for the experience of breathing the same air and looking at the same city that Brunelleschi did when he designed it. I scaled the Colosseum in Rome, St. Paul's Cathedral in London, the top of the Tower of London, or one of them anyway, and I had the opportunity to go to the lowest point and then the highest point in both St. Stephen's in Vienna and the Minster in York. I climbed a massive amount of steps in both Stirling Castle and the Wallace Monument in Scotland, just for the feeling of the wind on my face and to be that much closer to the sky. Most of these sorts of places have narrow circular staircases built for defense, so I would strain the muscles on one side of my body going up, going down I'd earn a match set. But it was worth the dizziness and the soreness. I got dizzy more than anything. The air at the top of these castles and these monuments is purer, it's more open, and is so much different than at ground level. For one thing, you know you're in a place that about half the people who visit can't or won't ever see. So you've already parted yourself a bit from the maddening crowd. It's quiet. It's so beautifully quiet. And such heights allow you to make the space your own, even if temporarily. You can say to the universe, I am, and you'll know that the universe has at least acknowledged your presence. But in all these high places, I was never afraid of falling. For one thing, there are so many safety railings and warnings and limits on the number of people that can be there at one time that you really have to work hard to take a tumble over the edge. In some places, however, that one that I really like to climb is called Brimham Rocks on North York Moors. They're merely signs saying, know your limits. Climb at your own risk. With nothing more than a brightly colored rope and a man going like this on a sign to let you know where the edge of the rock lies. I like that idea. At the same time, I'm challenged by it. Know your limits. I can't think of any of words any more inviting than these. Know your limits. Well, it makes me wonder how much we know of our own limits and our own fears. They can be useful, particularly when the fear is acting as instinct to say, hey, don't go harass that giant snarling animal with the 12-inch fangs and the hungry look in its eye and the very bad attitude. It's just not a good idea. But fear itself insinuates, it pulls you back, and it keeps you from trying anything new. Trying to keep it human-sized or smaller lessens its power tremendously. So I got to wondering about the most common fears that people have. And if you do a Google search, you'll turn up the top 10. Fear of heights, fear of open spaces, things like that. And I got to wondering, do you have a fear of flying? Or do you have a fear of smacking into the ground? Do you have a fear of water? Or do you have a fear of drowning? Are you afraid to ask your boss for a raise because you'll fear they'll no longer like or respect you? Or maybe deep down because you really believe you don't deserve one? Do you have a fear of staircases or a fear of falling down them? Do you have a fear of heights, of being in a high place, or a fear of falling? What if you knew early on how to take a fall so it wouldn't take too much time to get back up again? Would that change anything? I like that every day presents me with some new opportunity to step out of my personal comfort zone and get a little dirty. In fact, over the last 15 years, I spent very little time in my own personal comfort zone. We moved to England shortly after we were married. That was a leap with an uncertain landing, but I was never afraid. I was apprehensive, worried about, would the furniture show up when it was supposed to? Would I like the house? Would the Brits think I was an idiot? But I was never afraid. Moving from England to Germany, where I didn't speak the language and was faced with daily humiliations from failure to communicate even the most basic requests, was constantly demoralizing. And after so long overseas, we returned to the US with a severe case of reverse culture shock, even though things were, by comparison, so much easier. Comfort zones can be really tricky things. If you stay in one too long, it becomes a net that ensnares you. It's comforting, it's safe, but like the wisteria that grows around here so abundantly, it will eventually choke you, slowly and beautifully. You can cut through those knots and cords. You can fall to the ground and get a little banged up. Disconnecting from the safety of your well-designed nest will always yield something unexpected. But if you stay away from your comfort zone for too long, you lose your balance and your tether, and you run the risk of being defeated by the wind instead of gliding into it. You drift, but you don't steer. Both ways and extremes are the worst kind of traps. So, you can learn to climb and not fear either the height or the possible fall. Mother birds will shove their babies out of the nest when it's time for them to fly. If you ever watched this process, you know that the birds always fall a bit before they spread their wings like this and soar and then crash into something. But the next time, they don't need urging to leave the nest. They willingly leap from the edge and glide easily into the air. Eventually, one day, they perch on the boundary of the only safe space they have ever known. They launch themselves into the sky, they catch an updraft, they carve their place in the air, and they never return. A bird's life is pretty short and treacherous, but that never stops them from sitting in a tree and singing. So, here's what I wish for you, each of you, right now. I wish that the prospect of wheeling toward a possibility is stronger than the fear of falling. And that if you do fall or fail, you'll know how to hit the ground with grace, heal with compassion, and rise again with temperance. I wish that you see your fears for the size they actually are, that they contain knowledge in addition to challenges. I wish that you would find a rival or a competitor just every now and then, someone or something that urges you to push your limits and shrink your comfort zone. This might be a finite game, one that ends when you defeat it, or even better, in my opinion, an infinite game that seeks only to continue and challenge and refine. In my experience, it's fun to have a little of both. I wish that you would have a healthy fear of something and not a giant mass of anxiety, because anxiety cripples. Anxiety loves to lie, and anxiety convinces you that you are not even worthy of trying, whereas fear merely serves to challenge. Lastly, I wish that you would see the lows in your life, not as defeats, but as times of rest and healing. It's in the depths of the earth that we find the remains of our own history. It's also in the earth's depths that gemstones are formed under immense pressure and are brought toward the surface through the earth's own unrest and unease. Like the earth, we make deep internal shifts and repairs to seek our own balance, to have mystery and meaning in support, not conflict. In closing, I'd like to share some words I wrote a while back when I was deeply concerned about my own spot on this great wheel of creation. It is rarely worth it to forfeit your space on this earth before you're meant to. That space, this little tiny sliver of reality and all the mysteries that whisper behind it, was hard won because you were made from the same energy that you had to break through to be here in the first place. Remember that as you go about your week and wonder what exactly it is you're connected to, and when you decided it was time for your own existence. Because at some point, you said yes to possibility, and the universe heard and followed through, and now is waiting for you to thank its hospitality by knowing that you belong. So don't ever doubt that you deserve your spot here. With the universe putting its faith in you, what else could you do? Amen. Shanti. Selah. Thank you.